Hi, Jamie Benedict here in the Digital Marketing Classroom. Now, if you've been following the vlog, you know that my last vlog was on whether or not teenagers are tech savvy. Well, we're just a few days away from school getting started here and introducing this technology to the teenagers and getting our students prepared for this one-to-one curriculum where every kid has a computer in their hand. Well, as I was talking about this with some teachers, they suggested, maybe you should do a vlog on whether or not teachers are tech savvy. Since we're the ones that are going to be leading these kids and teaching them in this digital curriculum, are we going to be capable of putting them in the right direction and getting them where they need to be? And I thought that's a really interesting question. So I thought this was a great time to do that. As we've come off of our teacher trainings and our digital curriculum in services, and as we're moving through pre-planning and we're starting to do a little bit more with our digital curriculum, I thought, hey, this is a good time. Let's talk about whether or not teachers are tech savvy. And the answer is not as simple as I thought it was with teenagers. I don't think teenagers are very tech savvy. I think they've spent too much time on their phone and not enough time on the computer. So they really don't know what they're doing when it comes to working software, when it comes to navigating the internet and websites and things like that. And I think that's a big part of being tech savvy. So now then, are the teachers going to be tech savvy enough to do this with their students? And my answer is not as simple. First of all, I do think there's a group of teachers between the ages of 30 and 50 that are probably pretty technologically savvy. That's not to say all of them are. It's just that there's a pretty good group in that age range. And here's why I think that group is pretty technologically savvy. At 50 years old, they were graduating high school probably the mid to late 80s and moving into college as computers were starting to become more commonplace in education. So they either had to teach themselves or they took the classes so that they could understand how the computer works. And some of them fell in love with it right away and they started to learn more and more and more. Others just said, hey, look, I'm going to work through this. I'm going to make it do what I want it to do. And then I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna make sure that I'm successful with this, and that's good. That's part of being tech savvy. Now, at the tail end of that, when we're talking about the lower end, the 30-year-olds, I think a lot of them have this tech savviness, mostly because as they were leaving high school and in many cases college, they still hadn't had the smartphone yet. We're talking about them being in high school and college a little over a decade ago, and the smartphone hasn't been around for quite a decade yet. So they weren't jaded by that technology at such an early age, which means that they were still learning on computers and understanding how to make the computer work for them. And there's an adaptive quality to that, I guess, where they're trying to adjust or learning to adjust, and in many cases even self-taught. So I think that 30 to 50-year-old group is going to be just fine as we move into a digital curriculum. There's probably still going to be some fear there because many of them have not used it in their classroom and have lost the skills. I think business and marketing teachers will probably be okay because the technology is such an integrated part of our curriculum already. Whether you teach Word, Excel, and PowerPoint and things like that, or whether you've done marketing and you work DECA, where these kids have to do presentations and they have to write papers, and all of those skills are being taught on a regular basis to these kids. So I think that there's some advantages of being in that age group, and certainly in our field where you're going to see some technologically savvy adults. Now, if we look at the lower end, those that are under the age of 30, as they started to come up and the smartphone had been around and they started learning that, I think a lot of them kind of got away from their computer skills. They would rather have the tablet in their hand. And it doesn't work exactly the same. The tablet gives you a great internet portal. It doesn't really give you a great word processing function or presentation function, but it's quick, it's simple. It was a nice, easy, user-friendly operating system that they had come up with. And so I think if this were all tablets, the younger group would be fine. When it comes to computers, I think there's a transition, that there's going to be a bit of a learning curve. But I think the good news for them is that they're going to be on the faster end of that learning curve. They're going to adapt to technology a lot quicker than the older teachers are. So let's talk about that group of teachers over the age of 50. and the downfalls with this. Now, those teachers over the age of 50 probably made it through college without using computers too often. And probably haven't had to use it in their classrooms very much. And really, whatever they did, they probably just told the kids, hey, I want it typed, and the kids had to go home and type it. So they weren't actually teaching those skills. So I don't think there's as many technologically savvy adults or teachers in that over 50 group. Okay, it doesn't mean that there aren't any. There are some very technologically savvy adults that are over 50 that are very good at what they're doing, and they're going to be great with this. They'll transition nicely, and they'll be fine. But I think by and large, the feeling is going to be that that older group is going to start to feel left behind. In their classrooms, they probably don't use computers for much more than maybe attendance and grades and email. They're not incorporating it into their learning. And here's the downfall with this. And the downfall is going to be that some of these teachers that are getting to this age who have 30 years of teaching experience are going to start to look at this and go, do I really want to go through one more transition? And over the last couple of years, as the discussions were coming, when it came to digital curriculum, I heard a lot of teachers in that group that were saying, you know what, I think it's just time for me to get out. And that's unfortunate because they have so much to offer these students. They have so many things that they bring to the classroom that the discouragement and the fear of the technology has kind of pushed them out of education. And that's bad for our students. So how do we overcome that? Well, I thought at my school we did a great job with digital trainings for teachers. There were a couple things that I think kind of put some fear back in that older group though again, and one was we threw a lot of information at them in a very short period of time. And I think some of them got very nervous. However, being a part of those trainings, I thought it was great to see the excitement of teachers learning one or two things that they look at and go, you know what, I can use that in my classroom right away. And so I thought this is good. They're not as afraid as they were 3 months ago and 6 months ago. They're starting to see that there's a little bit that they can incorporate this year and maybe a little bit next year and a little bit next year and so on, so that they can stay in education and keep that experience in there with those kids because there's so much that they bring. The other thing that we saw with our digital trainings here was that it was actually a really short period of time. It was actually 2 weeks. It was really only 7 days where we were training our teachers, but it was so close to the start of school that there's not a lot of time for them to play around with it and really get the hang of some of these things. I do think just from a teacher standpoint that if your district is considering this, one of the suggestions might be, hey, let's start our digital trainings early and maybe go through an entire semester, and if you can, go through an entire school year of just some digital trainings and getting teachers on board and getting them to work with some of this stuff so that they can be more comfortable with it. Remember, the goal here isn't going to be to lose good teachers. It's going to be to take good teachers and make their classrooms great by getting this technology in there and combining it with what they already have to offer through their knowledge and through their experience with this framework that kids will hopefully start to embrace and understand and be able to learn. So I think there's some great opportunities here in learning how to implement this and keeping all of these teachers on board and keeping them on the same page. So, there's, I think, 3 distinct groups that we're going to see as this digital curriculum moves forward. And that'll be the case for, maybe the next 5 years or 10 years or so. And then it should be pretty commonplace. Hopefully the colleges will start training teachers in this, and there'll be a lot more prepared teachers coming into the profession that are ready to go with the digital curriculum right off the bat. And we'll start to see a much smoother transition there. But this is a great question, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. So go to the Facebook page and share what you think about the digital trainings and digital curriculum. and we'll get a comment and a dialogue going back and forth. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys taking time to listen to the video today, and class is dismissed.